Have you ever had sleep paralysis, and what was the experience like? I get sleep paralysis pretty frequently, so I've commented on this before. Now that I know what it is, I just kind of let the madness play out and fall back to sleep if I can. For a long time I thought I was experiencing hauntings or demons, or that I was going crazy. It's been a regular thing since I was really young. Usually I wake up, realize I can't move, and then have a super frightening visual, being operated on / autopsied, an invisible thing crawling into bed with me, shadow figures. It's the most horrific thing I can imagine, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I've had it throughout my life, including a few times as a child. If I had to guess, maybe 10 times, ever so not often. For me it's just a feeling of dread from being unable to move or speak. It's hard to judge time while it's happening. It doesn't go on for very long, at most I would say 2 to 3 minutes, but it's terrifying. It might seem crazy to people who haven't experienced it, but most people just fall back to sleep after a sleep paralysis episode. They don't stay up terrified all night. On a few occasions I've been able to move my fingers, but just barely, and it takes all your might to move a centimeter. Some people claim to have hallucinations, but I've never had any. An interesting fact is that alien abductions, ghosts, and other paranormal phenomena have been attributed to sleep paralysis. You might clearly see aliens or creatures around you, or they might be out of your peripheral vision. Sometimes shadows or a feeling that something is in the room with you. There's nothing paranormal or supernatural about it though. I like to think about sleep paralysis as a bug or glitch for humans. It's like thousands of pounds are on you. All you can move is your eyes, and it's honestly terrifying, though I learned a trick to wake up faster. Wiggle your toes and fingers. This has helped me very much. The worst thing I saw was a woman in a hospital gown open my room door and started screaming, and then repeatedly hit her head hard into my room door over and over, and she was crying and screaming, and it was the worst. Or sometimes I'll have sleep paralysis, where my dream will be that I'm late for something, and I'm self-aware that I'm having sleep paralysis, and I'm trying to wake up, and I'll dream that I woke up, only to not be able to move, and then I'll wake up from that thinking I'm awake, but I'm still dreaming, and it goes on for a while until I actually legitimately wake up. I get it almost every time I fall asleep on my back, so I've learned to deal with it really well, but apparently it's evolving. I'll elaborate. First, I'll learn not to open my eyes when it happens, or else you see freaky stuff all around your room. This worked well for a bit, until one time it was accompanied by auditory hallucinations. It was like strange voices whispering stuff in my ears. Couldn't really avoid this, so I just learned to try and ignore it. But now, apparently I also get body hallucinations. Not sure what to call it, where my whole body is tingling and feels like I'm levitating while spinning around really fast. This goes on until I open my eyes, but then I have to deal with seeing all the spooky stuff around my room and the occasionally jump scares that happen when I open my eyes and see something sitting on my chest and very close to my face. When this happens, the shock usually jerks me out of the paralysis. Otherwise, if a jump scare doesn't wake me up, I get out of the sleep paralysis by allowing to go back to sleep and back into a dream. Once inside my dream, I close my eyes and clench my fists really tight for 5 to 10 seconds, then release really fast. This will either completely wake me up or put me back into sleep paralysis, where I just repeat the process until I fully wake up. It was very scary. I was half awake, couldn't move or talk, but I saw a black human figure standing at the foot of my bed. Then it slowly started walking to my side of the bed. As it got closer, I got back control, and before it got to me, I was fully awake. I nearly pissed my bed. I didn't know what happened to me. Then I read up and saw it was sleep paralysis. It happens to me once or twice a year. It's still scary when it happens though. I'll never forget one time I had an episode, starting hearing weird noises and tried moving but couldn't. Obviously, was too afraid to try opening my eyes. Suddenly it gets dead silent, and I hear a little girl whisper, "My dad is dead." Then a man began whispering some satanic gibberish shit. When I finally could move again, I went right into my mum's room. I couldn't sleep alone for a few months after that. I'm not sure if this was sleep paralysis or not, but I was awake in my bed and couldn't move at all. Then this Slenderman mixed with Freddy monster appears in the doorway and is slowly making his way closer. Of course I try my hardest to move to get away, anything but nothing worked. The monster leaned over me and slowly reached for me with his clawed hand only for me to snap awake in that moment. I'm not sure if this was a dream or if I snapped out of a hallucination at that moment. I get sleep paralysis pretty regularly. At this point it's not a big deal. Usually it's a dream that someone has broken into my flat, except it feels fully real and I'm trapped in bed and can't move or scream. It usually happens in the middle of the night and I have to get up for a while to distract myself a bit before going back to sleep. I can recognize it pretty easily now, so it's not a big deal, but the first few times it happened it was scary as hell. I remember trying to scream as hard as I could, yelling in my head, and yet hearing nothing come out. It can be pretty scary the first few times, and not being able to move or speak while terrible things are happening to slash around you is a whole new level of fear. I've only had one experience with sleep paralysis, but it was pretty weird. About 6 to 7 years ago I lived in a house that was built on hill, where the front of the house was at street level, but it sloped down so the back was 2 floors up from the ground. My room was in the back of the house, with my bed against the back wall. There were 2 windows, one on either side of the bed, facing the backyard. I was asleep one night and jolted awake when I heard knocking on the window to my left. It didn't continue after it woke me up, but was disturbing since there weren't any tree branches nearby that could have done it, and since it was 20 feet up, it couldn't have been a person. I kinda brushed it off and went back to sleep. A couple nights later is when I experienced the paralysis. I woke up in the middle of the night, unable to move my body, only able to open my eye and look around. At the foot of my bed was not really a shadow, but more like this absence of light in a human figure. It just stood there. The only notable thing about it is that it appeared to be wearing a hat, since I could make out the shape of a brim. Since I couldn't do anything, I just closed my eyes until I fell back asleep. A few days after that I again unexpectedly woke up in the night, laying on my side, facing towards the window on my right. I don't remember if I had the paralysis this time, but I again saw a shadowy figure, but this one was a giant dog-like creature. It just sat in front of the window, staring out into the backyard. I posted about the 3 experiences on Facebook and a friend on mine instantly responded with an almost exact drawing of the figure from the second experience. Turns out he was working on illustrating a comic that a friend of his was writing on his experiences with sleep paralysis, and that's how I learned about Hat Man and Shadow People. I don't recall being frightened by the experience, just more so weirded out by the whole sequence that played out. I used to take melatonin to help me sleep a few years ago, and one of the side effects for me was that I experienced sleep paralysis a lot. No matter how many times I've experienced it, it's still as scary as hell. You're in a kind of half sleep half awake state. You can't move, but you desperately want/need to. I've experienced hallucinations sometimes, and other times I'm just awake, but I can't move. My heart is thumping like mad, my head is screaming in panic, and I can do nothing but stare at the wall and hope I'm able to move at some point. Some of the hallucinations have involved me when I've been sleeping on my stomach. I will feel a weight pushing down on my back, like a person or a creature, and I will feel and hear breathing on the back of my head/neck. It's terrifying. You know it's just a hallucination, but the physical feelings of the pressure on your body and your heart going nuts makes it consistently a terrifying experience. I've only experienced it once, but it was pretty freaky. I woke up lying facing the ceiling, and I tried to get up, since the sun was just barely starting to come up, but I realized I could only move my eyes. It also felt like the bed to my right was compressed, so I looked over. I saw, very clearly, a tall old woman staring right at me with her face inches from mine. She was laying on her side and her feet hung off the end of the bed. She looked a lot like what you typically think of a stereotypical witch to look like. Big nose, ugly, bulging eyes. I just lay there for what felt like a really long time, but probably was really only a minute or two with this creepy old lady witch thing staring at me and breathing heavily. I had tears streaming down my cheeks cause it was honestly horrifying. Then it was over, and I could move, and my chest just kind of collapsed with relief. After I learned this kind of hallucination is pretty common. The old woman I mean. The phenomenon is called the night hag, and has been around for a long time.